Hi, everyone. Hi, Courtney.
Hi.
Welcome to the Godless Moms podcast. I'm here with my good friend Courtney Hurd, also known as the Godless Mom. My name is Janice Selby, and I am wise counselor and also divorce religion on Twitter. And we have some interesting things to talk with you about today. Of course, I want to let you know first that we're coming to you from the unceded territory of the Syilx people in the Okanagan Valley, British Columbia. And it's not too soggy here right now, but I understand our friends down at the coast are about to undergo another atmospheric river event, and they're probably going to get quite a drenching. They may already be in there.
Yes, and it's weird because like I grew up in Richmond, which is for people who don't know Richmond, Richmond is an island in the mouth of the Fraser River. And it's literally under sea level. So there's these dikes that are built all the way around it, and that keeps the water from pouring in. And we just got word yesterday from a friend of ours that parts of the neighborhood that my husband grew up in were underwater. And
Wow.
that's like the thing that we grew up being afraid of the most in Richmond was
Mm-hmm.
the dikes failing and the water coming in. We were always, you're always being told about the big one coming, the big earthquake
Mm-hmm.
coming. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have to do all the earthquake drills in school and stuff like that. And in specifically in Richmond, we were always afraid that an earthquake would cause the whole dang thing to just sink into the Fraser River. So I guess
Yeah.
like it's kind of a horror show down there right now. Like all of the things that I used to be afraid of when I was a kid are happening. It's crazy.
We're having kind of a confluence of different events right now. Anybody who's prone to anxiety, if you can just go back to sleep for another year or so, is probably going to be helpful because, I mean, of course, the worldwide pandemic has been our background to life for the past, almost past couple of years. And then in the summertime in British Columbia, we had lots of forest fires. We had the heat dome, which killed hundreds of people in British
Yeah.
Columbia. It's unbelievable. And then we're just like, oh, like, thank goodness that's over. Now we're moving into better times. And then this freaking flooding, and there were weather changes, so there was lots of melting coming down, things that wouldn't normally happen until many months from now. And yes,
Mhm.
this is part of global warming. And so we've had these torrential at the coast rains, and then breaches in the dikes in the lower mainland. The town of Merritt, the whole town was evacuated. And now the town is forever changed because that river has kind of changed course. Like it's going down a street, a former street in the town. There's no way you can undo that.
Mhm.
That's just the way that it's going to be now. But yeah, some people have perished in the mudslides. That was just so horrifying. My daughter was visiting someone at the coast, and she got stuck there, tried to come back two different ways. Uh, and we're just so grateful that she is safe. She ended up having to fly back, had to leave her car at the coast and just fly back because she'd been there for a week, and she has a job here and things she needs to be doing in the Okanagan. So it really threw everyone for a loop, and it's ongoing.
Yes.
It's not stopping.
Yeah, and it seems like it's just like constantly BC has been in a state of emergency. It was, of course, the pandemic for the longest time. It was just going back and forth from being in a state of an emergency to not. And then when we had the heat dome, there were all the fires all over BC, and it just absolutely devastated. Like one town is gone now, just gone,
Yes,
just
Lytton.
razed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the floods, Lytton, the highway into Lytton was washed out too. So it's like,
Yeah.
if there is a God, I said this on Twitter, if there's a God, the God said, screw this particular town, you know?
Yeah. Craziness.
but
Yeah.
but
And
we
it's
had that.
interesting. Yeah.
we had that. The fires were another state of emergency, and then just last week with the floods, they declared another state of emergency. Like it's like the norm now. They don't have to declare it because it's like it's the norm, and it's just really weird. I never expected the climate crisis to hit BC so hard, just because BC was always such a mild climate, and I don't know. It's very weird. It's weird.
Disconcerting. It is. And of course, at the end of our country as well, our maritime provinces are just being walloped right now with some tremendous storms, and they're having floodings and challenges of their own. So it's not only BC, but what has gone on in BC has been so unparalleled that it's put us on the map. Like we've been all over. I'm hearing from people in Scotland and all different parts of the world, Turkey, even someone contacted me and said, what is going on over there? Like, are you safe? And in the Okanagan, we're quite safe. We've been somewhat cut off from the lower mainland. Our supply chain has been disrupted, but not, nobody's going to be starving or anything. We're getting some stuff from Alberta and that sort of thing. So we're okay, but it does make one nervous thinking what else is going to come. And we're told that these events, which previously had been like once in a century or whatever, they're going to become once every 30 years. Once every 20 years. And this does have to do with global warming and how things are changing. And how that intersects my life is that I'm a therapist and I work with people who are generally in recovery from religious trauma and religious trauma syndrome. And some of these folks, particularly folks who were raised in very fundamentalist homes. And I'm thinking of a lot of my Jehovah's Witness clients. They've left the JW group, I'll call it a group, and they no longer believe that. But these thoughts in the back of their head that you really impress that Armageddon is right around the corner. When you're growing up in a JW household. I mean, I had one person say to me, they vividly remember one day when they were actually as tall as their own fridge as a teenager, because they never thought they would live that long. That's how impressed their parents had made them about how close the end of the world and Armageddon was. And so, these people are adults now, mature, living their lives, doing their best, but just that fear and panic sometimes can get really riled up and the anxiety rises when we just look out our window and see these changes that are happening. And if your only framework previously for interpreting information and situations has been through a spiritual lens, so whatever your holy book says or whatever your prophets or religious people told you, that's how you've always interpreted things. And it can be tricky moving beyond that or leaving that behind and really trying to embrace things from a factual point of view instead.
Yes, and coming from a secular background, it was never a topic in our household. Nobody ever said that, like, not even through natural disasters or anything like that would the world ever end. Like, it was never a topic, ever. It was never something I was afraid of until I started watching like zombie movies and The Walking Dead and stuff like that, right? And so that, it doesn't necessarily scare me. It's like, you see this pandemic happening and then you see all of these natural disasters, which, you mentioned that they're supposed to be happening once every 30 years. We had like 2 major ones in 1 year this year. And so when you see these things happening, it's like you're going back to The Walking Dead and just be like, okay, who do we need to have in our compound? Like, where are we going to get all our supplies and stuff like that? We regularly talk about this. It's obviously we're just joking and stuff like that. But my husband and I will talk about, okay, who do we need? And Where do we get our supplies and stuff like that?
I tell you who you want in your group. You want someone who grew up in the Mormon tradition, because man, those people know how to prep.
Yeah.
They really know how to do
travel.
all that stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
But I can imagine though, because like I never had those things like pumped into my head, and I still am so put off by all of this. And we saw, because of all of the supply chain issues, a lot of the people around us began to panic last week, and all of the grocery shelves were empty.
Yes.
And
so
it
wasn't toilet paper this time. It was like produce and dairy.
And meat. I don't understand that. Like, if you think that the supply chain is broken and we're going to run out of food, why would you get stuff that's going to go off in a week? I don't know. These aren't intelligent people, apparently.
It's so amazing to me, imagining a childhood where you didn't sit around the kitchen table and have your parents saying, well, things are shaky in the Middle East. It's Gog and Magog. Those are biblical terms, and it's the end of the world. Jesus will be coming back. That was discussed regularly and seriously, or at the very least, just commented. If we'd be watching the news, oh yeah, that's a sign of the times. And so that's how I grew up thinking. And so now I've left religion behind quite happily, but shows like what you call it, Walking Dead, any zombie apocalypse, I'm like, I don't. I already feel like I got my fill of all that nonsense.
Yeah.
When I was growing up. So anything supernatural or whatever, those things have no appeal to me. But there is some value in preparedness, in thinking through. If we are prepared for a worst case scenario, and then it never comes, then that's great. If we do have some supplies put aside, if we've got fresh water, canned food, medication, whatever things that we might need in case there was a natural disaster that cut us off for a week or a couple weeks. It just makes sense as a human adult to be prepared in that way. And then once you have put some of those things aside, you're not going to be as consumed by it. There are emergency preparedness websites that people can go to, checklists, ways that you can prepare and take care of yourself. And that can help decrease anxiety.
Yeah, agreed. We have, because of the fires, which we have every year. We have fires here every year. This year
we do now, but we didn't, remember?
Yeah, that's true. We didn't. But because we have them every year now, like we always have our bug out bags, and we have like a box of like the keepsakes that we want to take with us if we have to evacuate, which is a very likely scenario in the Okanagan. And then we also have this room downstairs in our basement that we just put some canned goods in and stuff like that. So we and it's just like packed with pasta because that lasts, right?
Yeah. Don't forget the tomato sauce, though.
Yeah.
And a pot. You might want a pot.
Yeah. And it last week when that happened, like, to give it some context, we have three or four different highways that come from if you count going through the states, that come from the Lower Mainland to here. And that's it comes from, most of our supplies come from the Port of Vancouver and warehouses in the Lower Mainland. There's a Walmart warehouse there. There's an Amazon warehouse there. Like, most of everything that fills our grocery stores comes from the coast. And all of those highways suffered just an immense amount of mudslides, washouts, and damage. The Coquihalla in particular, there was 7 or 8 different places where the highway it's not even just the highway that is gone. It is like the ground that the highway was on. There's nowhere to put a highway there anymore.
Yeah, that's shocking.
And if you actually go and look at the footage of the Coquihalla Highway and the damage that was done to it, you can't help but think it's going to be at least a year if not more, before we see that highway open up again. And that is the most common route from the Lower Mainland. And so we were scared. Like, people were scared that we were not going to be getting produce, meat, dairy, stuff like that from the coast for a long time. But because I had we call it the warehouse, the room where we store all our pasta. Because we had a lot of pasta, I wasn't really worried.
I'm taking notes.
I know where to go. I could see how people were, though, if they didn't have that. And there are a lot of people who live paycheck to paycheck, and they don't have the option to do that. So I can absolutely see why they would panic. But sadly, the people who do live paycheck to paycheck are the ones who were affected by those grocery stores emptying the most, because they emptied on a Tuesday, and most people don't get paychecks till Fridays.
That's right.
But luckily, within a few days, the Highway 3 was reopened again. I think it's 2 days later, it was another slide on that highway, and they had to close it again, and we were cut off again, but only for a few hours. And then it's now currently open with one way with alternating traffic. So.
Yeah, I see BC Stargazer made an interesting point too. The railroads also were affected, which bring a lot of stuff to Vancouver and then distribute it on trucks, such as restaurant chains, supplies. This is very true. It's been just really a perfect storm. But what it does is it gives our government, and it gives us personally, it brings to the forefront the need for us to be able to take care of ourselves. We can't just pretend anymore. I mean, they do drills in schools for what if it's an earthquake or an active shooter or a fire or terrible things that you hope would never happen. But the children and young people must be prepared for what to do if that comes up. And so, we can also take responsibility for ourselves in our home setting or in our work setting, and be prepared. Even thinking about, okay, what if? So I know where my home is situated. If I wanted to get into town, and that route I always take was blocked off, and I had to get away, what way would I go? Just being aware ahead of time, so you don't have to live with this panic or anxiety about it, because I've got a plan for what I would do. And sometimes plans don't work out, and so we don't blame ourselves and beat ourselves up when that happens, because we can't imagine every possible eventuality. But it's better to have a plan than not to have a plan. And Tracy made an interesting point. I don't know if you see it. If people think Armageddon is inevitable, it will be difficult to convince them to change behaviors regarding climate change. And you're right, there are some real issues with people who are religious fundamentalists, trying to get them to take climate change seriously. And because a lot of them do think that, the world is going to be ending anyway. So why should I bother?
I can't. Oh, we have a third guest.
That's Steve. That's my cat, Steve.
I can't imagine thinking that way. Like, I know that, like, there's been a lot of religious people that I've come across on Twitter and stuff like that who have insisted that the end of the world is coming and that it's something to be happy about. And also the Jehovah's Witnesses who come to my door, who, I mean, that's a whole saga. I've written about it on my blog. But we are on first name basis. I do get texts and I do get letters in the mail.
Wow. That is cool. No, thank you.
They are constantly talking about, how the world is going to end, and how, you better get right with God before then. And it's going to be so beautiful after the world ends and stuff like that. And I'm just like, it's so sad to me to see that, because the world already is a beautiful place to be. Like, it's already filled with amazing things and amazing people and amazing
And
things to
Steve.
do.
That's
And Steve,
Steve.
yeah. And it's just like they're just kind of riding out every day, waiting for something that we're all aware isn't going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the world may end one day, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to end the way they think that it is. It's not going to be they're not going to be like taken to some amazing paradise.
And this is a huge issue when people leave religion, coming to terms with the fact that this is what we have, this here and now. Because I grew up in fundamentalist Christianity, evangelicalism, and the thought wasn't for today. The thought was always for the future. Our great hope was in the future because our fantasy was about being in heaven after we die. And wouldn't it be wonderful? And you're storing up for yourself, and this is a verse from the Bible, storing up for yourselves treasures in heaven. So even any friendships that I would make here were for the purpose of witnessing, proselytizing to people, because that would be another jewel in my heavenly crown or another room in my heavenly house, however people would want to say it. So you're not really giving thought to the here and now. And then also, people, I think, care less about taking precautions like getting vaccinated because they think, well, they say, oh, when it's your time, it's your time. When God's going to call you home, he's going to call you home, which is just ridiculous and drives me so crazy. But it is very much in line with their thinking.
Yeah, I think I like internally cringe whenever I'm around people who say everything happens for a reason. Stuff
Ooh.
like that, it drives me crazy. I'm like, literally no.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, not some celestial reason, but because you made a choice or because you
Right.
did something
Yes.
dumb. Like
Yes.
that's why. Everything happens
Sometimes
for
that's the
those
reason.
reasons. Yeah.
Right. And I think also we feel safer when we can blame someone else for their misfortune. So in religious circles, people might say, well, God is punishing you, God is chastening you, and when you've had some tragedy happen, because it makes us feel safer to look at that person and be able to come up with a reason why this terrible misfortune, why their child has, is suffering from a disease or they've lost someone in a car accident. It has nothing to do with God. There's nobody being punished at all. Sometimes terrible things happen to good people, and we wish there was a reason for it. We'd feel safer if we
Yeah.
knew how we could avoid it. But
Yeah.
sometimes you can do everything right, and tragedy still strikes. That's just a fact of life. That's adulting, unfortunately. So that's something also that we need to recognize and stop victim blaming.
Yeah, it goes right back around to control again. It's the same reason why people have decided to believe that there's some kind of conspiracy or that COVID is some kind of a conspiracy because
Mm-hmm.
it means that at least some human is in control on some level.
Yeah.
And when you believe that God is punishing you for bad behavior, that gives you the illusion of control. Okay, well, now I just need to be good and bad things won't happen to me anymore.
Yeah.
And of course that itself causes trauma because then you be as good as you possibly can be and bad things still happen to people and you find yourself
Right.
wondering, does God just not love me or
Yes, yeah, that's exactly. I mean, think of a young child being raised in a very authoritarian, very religious home, and Christianity is what I'm familiar with because that's my background, uh, and and that child is told that God sees everything they do and God takes notes and God will punish you, and if something bad happens, God is punishing you, and mommy and daddy are God's representatives on earth, and if they have a screw loose and they think that they have to beat the hell out of you, then you have a child thinking, where's God in this? am I really this terrible person? And kids aren't equipped to deal with stuff like that. And then if the kids do survive, they can have an awful lot of mental health issues as a result. So I think the sooner we can teach children about their own power and about accepting responsibility and taking responsibility and making wise choices and being able to have very open conversations with our kids rather than trying to instill fear into them. What a difference there could be in this world when we have adults who've grown up in a healthier environment.
Yeah, it's because, I mean, essentially that's how I grew up, with parents like that. And when somebody comes to my door, for instance, knocking with a watchtower in hand, insisting that the end of the world is upon us. I remember this one time they came to my door, and the first thing that she said to me was, how are you holding up and this was before the pandemic. So she's like, how are you
Right.
holding up? I know the world seems really dark right now, and like, how are you making it through everything? I'm like, what do you mean making it through everything? I'm like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm happy. I have beautiful kids. I have a beautiful dog. I love my house. I love my view. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I have nothing to complain about. Of course, there are terrible things happening in the world, and I mean, you guys know that I care about those things. I'm tweeting about stuff constantly, but it's, my life and the world that most people live in is a pretty nice world. And when you actually look at statistics and data and all of that stuff, things are a lot better than they were, especially if you're a minority, if you're a woman, if you are, belonging to the LGBTQ plus community. Things are a lot better now
In
than they used
Canada,
to
in
be. Yeah,
Canada in particular. Yeah.
yeah. And
We're
yeah,
still got a
obviously
long way to go.
there's parts of the world where it's terrible for a lot of people still, but it's the world that we live in is, statistically speaking, a lot better. Obviously, everybody's personal experience is going to be different, and there are tons and tons of people out there who are going through hell, and that's terrible. But it's just, when they come to my door and they say, oh, the world looks so bleak
Right.
and everything's terrible, and I'm like, well, I don't know about that, because I've seen a lot of signs of progress lately, and a lot of things that I like lately. um so it just instantly, I cringe inside, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like there's absolutely no way that I would ever absorb that information. Like, I'm just immune to
Mm-hmm.
ever being sucked into that. At least I hope. I
Mm-hmm.
hope. Um but
Another thing that people might want to do, or it just could be helpful, be aware of your own anxiety level, and we experience it differently in our bodies. So be aware of our own responses. How is my body signaling me when I've about had all I can take for the day or whatever? You're allowed to turn off your TV, to turn off your radio, to get off social media. Sometimes the healthiest thing we can do is take a break from the news. You don't, unless you're in immediate danger, you don't need to be listening every hour for the latest broadcast. You're allowed to give yourself that break. And sometimes it's the healthiest thing that we can do. And also, don't forget, just like you said, the many good things, the great things that are still happening, that are still available to us. Reach out and call somebody. Watch a funny program. Read a book that has nothing to do with these things that are going on. Lose yourself in a game or a magazine or something. You're allowed to give yourself a break in that
yeah.
way, and our mental health can benefit when we do that.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I swim is because, like, that's like few places where I can't have my phone in my face.
Oh yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
But
It's like,
that's
for me,
very
it's like
true.
meditation. It's like, because I have my watch counts my laps for me, so I don't even have to count my laps. I just it's just me and my brain alone in the water. And so I think everybody can benefit from that sort of time where I don't know who said it or how it was said once, but somebody said to me at one point in time that boredom is a gift, that is when you start to get to know yourself better. And that's when you come down from everything else that's stimulating you. And I think that most of us in today's world are way overstimulated and have absolutely no idea how to handle just sitting and not doing
Yes.
anything,
I
not looking
certainly
at a
think
screen.
that's true of our children as well, growing up in this age where they
Yeah.
don't get a break from screen time. And sometimes it's that very boredom, that's where creativity has a chance to arise.
Yeah.
So yeah, that can be a good thing. Just making sure we have that quiet time. Try not to have every minute of your day filled. If you are purposely filling your day right full from the time you get up to the time you put your head on the pillow, recognize that also can be a trauma response. Is there something that you're avoiding? Something that's very upsetting to you that you are not wanting to deal with by keeping yourself too busy?
Of course, some people don't have the privilege, though, of taking time for themselves.
Oh
There's a lot of,
yeah. I think of moms in particular.
single working moms. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
um, and it's hard when you have, even just when you have kids, like even if you're not working and you get lots of help, when you have kids, it's difficult to get a moment where there's not a voice.
Oh boy. And if those kids happen to have special needs, yeah, it's true. And yet one of my favorite sayings is no one is coming to rescue us. We must rescue ourselves. There's no savior. No one's coming to save you. You got to save yourself in the sense of um, you are the one that knows when you're struggling, when you feel like you're going under. It's up to you as best you can, and it's going to look different from person to person, to have any supports in place for yourself that you can. And if you're a single mom, uh, there are places in your community potentially that you can reach out to. Find these places before you're in a state of crisis. And this is as true for me as anybody else, like, because there's all sorts of things that can come up and knock us off our feet. If we have some supports in place already, if there are a couple of people that we can turn to, or places to go for help, and we know that ahead of time, it can make things easier for us in the long run.
Yeah. Very, very true. I had a lot of help because my mom she's one of those people that fills every moment of her day with busyness. So she's always doing stuff with my son, taking him places, hanging out with him. So I was very lucky in that way. And now my brother is here and he has a 2-year-old daughter. And so my mom's spending lots of time with her now.
Oh, good. Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful. Oh, and so even though being overly busy can indicate maybe we need to examine why we're being so busy, for some people, like your mom, it sounds like that's also a way that she nourishes herself. She gets back what she's giving out. She gets as much from that sweet little grandbaby, or more, as the grandbaby does from time with grandma right now when she's so little. So that's a good thing. We want to build positive things into our life, like wonderful things that give us wonderful feedback.
Yeah. And I think like another way that you can deal with anxiety that's associated with everything that's going on in the world, being as a lot of these things are kind of tied to climate change, and maybe even we'll find out one day that maybe even the coronavirus was tied to that in some way too. But it's changing your habits to reduce your carbon footprint, and that is something that I kind of suck at.
Because it's so inconvenient. But
it is, It is, but it's not so much anymore. There's a lot of cool things happening, and I don't know, I've mentioned this a couple of times on Twitter, but there's here in town, I don't know how common these stores are around the world, but in Summerland there's a store called Replenish Refillery where you go, and actually, if you ever heard the old saying that cellar door is the most beautiful phrase in the English language, I think
Yeah.
replenish refillery is such a nice. Anyways,
Replenish
total aside.
refillery.
Yeah.
Mm,
And
I
you
like it.
she's just booming. It's actually a friend of mine, and it's booming right now. Because you go in with your mason jars, and she just has these big tubs of all natural, like, cleaning products and stuff like that, and shampoo, soaps, conditioners, all kinds of stuff, and she has all these amazing just household items, like these Swedish dishcloths, which are um they can be composted, and
Oh,
they're super cool. They're like cardboard when you get them, but when you wet them they turn into a cloth, and then you can
yeah.
wash them in
That is
your
cool.
dishwasher.
Yeah.
And yeah,
So it's
but you
all things that are
refill
really
your
good for the
jars.
environment. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's no plastic, you're not taking home any plastic at all.
Right.
And
Right.
so that's one thing that's one thing you can do, is look for places like that. I know that these things are popping up. I'm hoping that they're popping up everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Um and also reducing how much meat you eat, which is difficult for somebody like me. Although I don't really eat that much meat, it's more my family. They
Mm.
really like eating meat and stuff like that, and it's already difficult to please two teenagers.
The
Um,
meat, the meatless meat is pretty good. The plant-based meat, but right now it's still really expensive.
yeah. Yeah, and it's
Mm-hmm.
also like it's just vegan food has come a long way, and my brother is a vegan. His whole family is a vegan, and so I have to cook vegan food when he comes over, and I have it when I go to his house, and when we go to restaurants, we're always going to vegan restaurants and stuff like that, which I do not mind at all, and I've had some absolutely amazing vegan dishes that I
Yeah,
would
same.
eat over and over again by choice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's another way that you can reduce your carbon footprint. But I think if you're taking some kind of an active role in it, like we last year we installed a compost bin in our backyard. Um, and just we've made some small changes around the house. We've changed all our light bulbs and just stuff like that. And
Have you seen that there are also countertop composters that you can get at places like
yeah.
Canadian Tire? I thought
Hmm.
that was great. And I love this idea that you're talking about different ways that we can challenge ourselves, make it a game.
Yeah.
Especially if you have kids and wanting to involve them because it's their future that we're talking about, rather than this onerous, oh God, I can't believe I have to do this thing, but instead this challenge of, well, how can our family contribute? How can we lessen our footprint environmentally? What are some ideas? So you bring the attitude to it
Hmm.
as the parent and as the adult.
Yeah,
Oh, I
and
like
and
that.
that's something that can lift your anxiety too, is by passing on the knowledge to your kids. That
Mm-hmm.
in itself is taking some kind of action towards
Mm-hmm.
climate change. Obviously, we need a lot more than that
Right.
to 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 reverse. We can't. I don't even know that we can reverse what's happened,
Right.
but
Right. Right now, we're just trying to put the brakes on, really trying to mitigate um, the damage. Volunteering also another great way to
yeah.
help us to help decrease our anxiety while also helping other people. I'm always recommending that people volunteer. We got a couple of notes here that I think might be reasonable. Do you want to read them out from BC Stargazer, just about some of the stuff going on around BC right now?
Yeah, I knew that there was going to be a press conference today. So the BC Highways Minister just announced that Highway 1 in Lower Mainland will reopen at 2 p.m. today, so that will help. And Highway 3 is for essential travel with many one-lane only sections. And that means one lane only because Highway 3 is one lane this way, one lane this way, most of the way.
Yeah.
Which is why people always chose the Coquihalla to come this way. But this means
Mm-hmm.
one lane only, like alternating traffic. So that's how we've been getting most of our goods. And then Highway 1 in Fraser Canyon and Highway 5, yeah, the Coquihalla is going to be closed for a long time. And the CP trains have resumed operations from Kamloops and Hope, but at minimal volume. But still good news. Yeah, all of that is good news except the Coquihalla. But that's going to be, like I said, I think that's going to be longer than a year. There's no ground to even rebuild the.
Well, and we're heading into Canadian winter, so it's hardly ideal conditions to be trying to construct anything. I want to say hello also to KCA Randy and everyone who has joined us. We're so glad that you tuned in today. Thanks very much. And we'd love to hear from you. Are there ways that you are reducing your own climate footprint, or any things that you're specifically doing, ideas that you've heard about? This would be a great show to for us to share some of those ideas.
Yeah, it's another thing that you can do, of course, is walk, not drive. And sadly, for people who love to travel, air flight is a terrible polluter. But yeah, those are some tough things. But we're heading into some more bad weather in the Lower Mainland, according to the forecast, which means that within a matter of days we could be cut off again, because everything is just completely changed. And it's like, when we say cut off, we really mean cut off. Like the town of Hope, the highway on-ramps and off-ramps were cut off. They were washed out. And so there was a nurse on TikTok. She posted a TikTok where she said that she had a shift in Hope, where she normally worked, but she lived in Chilliwack. She had to be airlifted in by helicopter just to go to work.
Wow.
Just to go to work. Yeah.
Wow.
Like, you can't get in there. Yeah. And there's like Lytton was cut off the highway was cut off, and
poor Lytton.
You couldn't get in and out of Agassiz.
It was yeah. And also, of course, right now we're on gas rationing as well. Are we still on that? I think we are. Yeah. And they were saying it's supposed to fill up more than 30 liters, I think. So yeah, it's kind of an uncomfortable time in British Columbia right now, but also I will say tragedies can and often do bring out the best in people. And we saw this, remember, in when 9/11 happened in New York. It was just such a devastating time, but people, New Yorkers, maybe for the first time ever, actually really were showing concern and tenderness for one another and really banding together. And we'll see this in BC as well. People feel good being able to help other people.
Yeah, we already have seen it. There's a lot of people in town who are putting up people who were evacuated from Merritt here in Summerland, and like almost every day in the group, the local groups, there's people posting about needing something for these families, like kids' pajamas or toothbrushes or whatever. And then we also saw in Hope, there was a pizzeria owner who was going around to all the people stuck in their cars because the hotel was full.
Oh yeah.
There was a church that was letting people in, but that was full at some point. So there's people sitting in their cars just waiting to get out of Hope because they were stuck in Hope. Hope is a place where everybody stops. Everybody stops in Hope when you're driving from the Lower Mainland to. It's the perfect pee stop, right? Because you've been driving for a while, and you have to stop. You get a coffee and you
go into Timmy's. Yeah. Get your gas. Yeah.
So at any given time in Hope, there's always travelers passing through, and so all these people got stuck when this happened. And there was a pizzeria owner who was going to all the car doors and knocking and handing them pizza and drinks.
As a mother of a type 1 diabetic, I can tell you that could be life-saving, and that's immediately where my mind went when I heard, because there were 2 slides on the Coke that so there were a group of cars that were stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
And they couldn't go forward and they couldn't go back. And some people were stuck for, a couple of days there. And I just thought, my God, what about if there are any diabetics in that
There
car,
was.
if they were unprepared, because you always have to have sugar available if you need it, because if your blood sugar drops, you need to boost it back up. And also you need your insulin.
There was a diabetic, and at some point somebody who was stuck there had posted that it really hit him when he saw somebody going car to car knocking and asking
Yeah.
for insulin.
Ooh, yeah, I
Yeah.
feel that. I've been that mom, stuck
Yeah.
in construction that you didn't anticipate, and what you thought was only going to be a 1 or 2 hour trip, and you've got your diabetic child with you, and then it's the one time you don't have extra supplies with you, and you have to go knock on windows and ask for help to save the life of your child. It's very
Yeah.
humbling and it's extremely terrifying.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It gave me chills when I read that, and it just really sends it home the level of catastrophe that this was, and the fact that climate scientists and people who are much smarter than me say that things are only going to get worse is just mind-boggling. I can't imagine a worse year than this year in BC, despite the fact that where I live, it was fine, everything was fine. We were still affected by all of this, and I feel for all of the people there's a lot of people in BC who lost their homes this year and lost loved ones this year, and I cannot imagine what worse looks like. I can't imagine that. And let's not forget, like right before the pandemic hit, the fires in Australia, like
Yeah. Yeah, wiping out huge, yeah, massive, exactly, massive portions of forest. And I'm thinking too about how climate change it's bringing a new kind of refugee. The rest of the world is used to political and war refugees, and I will say a lot of that has to do with extremist religions. But now we are also seeing those countries that already were poor and struggling are the ones that are going to be hardest hit. Some of the ones by climate change, but also places where the wealthy like to go and play. Some of the tropical places, they're saying we're in danger. Our island is going to be covered uh, with water in however many years. We need action now. We need help now. So it's affecting all of us around the world.
yeah, it's definitely off-putting. It makes me lie awake at night sometimes. Like I said, I can't imagine a worse year for BC than this year. And I mean, if things get worse, I just can't even wrap my mind around it. I'm in a very good place because I'm like up high on a mountain. And so, flooding isn't necessarily going to be a thing that happens here. But, we also face potential avalanches, and also we face the wildfires, which every year is pretty scary. I remember one year, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, I was sitting on my balcony, and my balcony like I'm looking right now at Naramata, and which is across the lake. So you see the lake and
Mm-hmm.
all these hills across the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sitting on our balcony, which is the same view, just one floor down. And there was a lightning storm coming through. It was one of those dry lightning storms.
Yes,
And we
yes.
were watching as every bolt hit those hills over there, burst into flames, and
Wow.
a
Oh.
wildfire was born. And we watched it happen, and we were so mesmerized by this happening, we didn't
Yeah.
notice that lightning struck the hill behind us. And I call them hills because I'm from the coast, and
Right.
Whistler is a mountain. This isn't
Right.
a mountain. um,
Right.
but it was terrifying. And I remember going down to the beach later that day, or I think it was the next day, and watching like the water bombers come down and scoop up the water and go try to put out like 7 different wildfires across the way. But it's scary. We are absolutely at the mercy of nature, and it's awe-inspiring.
And so it can be so anxiety inducing and raising and provoking. And of course, it's very important when we have children in the house that we are doing our best to keep our anxiety under control, because our kids are picking up on whatever, even if we don't mean to. And we want our children to feel safe. We also want to be able to model for our children healthy behaviors and ways of taking responsibility. So ways that we can decrease our own anxiety are by taking action. Some of the things that we were just talking about, making a list, get some food together, figure out alternate ways of getting out of town, look at it, make a short-term plan and a long-term plan, and you can include your kids in that. But that's one way that we can really help ourselves. And then, like I said earlier, unplugging from social media sometimes or from news can be helpful too. Why not have a games night? Get out Scrabble, get out whatever it is that you want to play around the table with your kids, and you're only going to be listening to happy music or interacting with them that way, because they have really been affected by the whole pandemic as well. And they have picked up on this kind of river of anxiety that's flowing all around them. The current is all around them. So we want to be mindful of that with kids.
Yeah, BC Stargazer said another good thing, said understanding with education and preparedness eases the worrying. And I think that's super true, especially with your kids. And I think that it's important to educate your kids also because, they're the next generation. They're going to be in charge of all of this. And sadly, it's going to be a lot scarier for them if we don't take this seriously. And educating them is... I think educating them about climate change is an important thing that has to happen at home, because you can't trust teachers to be doing it properly and really making them understand without terrifying them, making them understand that it's a serious thing.
It's also important for those of us recovering from religion and religious trauma, that comment, understanding with education and preparedness eases the worrying. That's true. So we can learn to understand our bodies. What does it feel like to me when my emotions are rising, when my anxiety is rising? Because that is my body giving me a signal that I need to reestablish a feeling of safety for myself. So understanding about your own body, understanding sometimes, I feel triggered by this. What's it reminding me of from my childhood and from the things that I learned? Never beating ourselves up for it, for those thoughts that come into our head without us wanting them or intending for them to be there. We don't have to get stuck on them, but it's not going to be helpful for us to beat ourselves up about, there's that thought again. Why am I always thinking this way? Educating ourselves. What's actually the truth of this situation, rather than this huge, fearful juggernaut kind of that my parents drilled into me, that this is all going to just have the worst possible ending. Steve really wants to be on the show today.
He needs his own podcast. Get it? Podcast.
Oh, I love you. My goodness. Hey, I did want to let folks know, that's slightly off topic, but I've already started preparing for the conference on religious trauma. That's going to be coming up in 2022, Court 2022, and it's going to be the weekend of April 29th to May 1st, and it's probably going to be online again because we're still sorting through all this stuff. Steve may or may not join us for the conference. And I'm already soliciting speakers, and I'm actually doing a bit of a fundraiser for myself right now because I'm the one that's putting out all the costs right now as far as setting up the website, advertising. I'll be offering honorariums to speakers. There are all sorts of costs involved with hosting such a big event. So yeah, I do have a fundraiser going on. I should have got a link to it and put it in the show notes, but it's anyway. Thanks, pal. Yeah, I'd be just so grateful. Anybody who wants to toss a few bucks that way. Also, I am wanting to be able to provide scholarships to people and bursaries to people. I did that quite a bit last year because lots of people wanted tickets, but they just financially weren't in a great situation. And I want as many people to benefit from the Conference on Religious Trauma as possible. So some of the money will also go towards that. So thanks for your support.
Yeah, it's the goal of the conference is to provide a safe place for people who have recovered from religious trauma, but also to educate mental health practitioners who don't know how to treat, like most of them in the world don't know how to treat religious trauma syndrome. And like a lot of atheists, when they go see therapists or any kind of mental health uh, practitioner, they sometimes are a little bit blindsided with religious talk at some point, especially if you're in the US. And so this is a conference that will give mental health practitioners the tools to be able to treat people who are struggling after leaving religion. And it's so important to have these mental health practitioners available for atheists. It's so important for them because,
Mm-hmm.
as you know, Janice, it's a difficult thing to leave religion behind for a lot of people, and
Mm-hmm.
they struggle a great deal with that. So please, if you can spare like $5, give. You have to believe me when I'm telling you. I've worked with Janice on the conference, like doing her websites and stuff like that for a long time, and you have to understand how much of her own money and time and effort and sanity she puts in to this conference. And it
Yeah.
went off beautifully last year. It was an
Mm-hmm.
absolutely beautiful thing. There was Daryl Ray, Marlene Winnell, Dave Warnock, Karen
Yasmin
Gorham,
Mohammed. Mm-hmm.
yeah, Yasmin
Mm-hmm.
Mohammed, Candace Gorham, and
Jeremiah
just,
Camara. Yeah.
yeah, so many amazing speakers and artists, and just it's such a good cause. So if you can spare $5, that's my spiel. Um, you're
Yeah, we'll
doing a
have
good
some
thing
of the
if you
big
spare.
names returning next year as well, and then we'll have some folks that maybe you're less familiar with, but actually have very important things to say on the topics that we'll be covering. So I want to be looking at the role of the church in the cultural genocide that's been perpetrated against First Nations people in Canada and around the world. So we're going to have a couple of guests who are addressing that specifically. I'm going to be talking about some of the dangers associated with fundamentalist religious education and homeschooling. I'm going to be looking at the role right now around the world, but particularly in the United States, the interplay of politics and religion, because that's just something that's significant that's going on. Yeah, there's a lot of topics that will be new from last year. We will also be addressing exploring sexuality post religion, because that's another really big one. I think Dr. Ray is going to be talking with us about that. So I saw you smirking. What are you looking at over there?
Oh, I just kept hearing purring.
Oh, oh, Steve. Yeah. Well, he's a noisy cat, but it's kind of nice to have a cat that you can hear. My other cat is
Yeah.
so quiet. I closed
Oh
him in the
yeah.
couch when I was closing the sofa bed. I didn't even know he was in there. And I'm like, why isn't this couch closed? And then I pull it
Aw.
back out and he jumps out. He was fine.
Aw.
He was totally fine. But
Aw.
I'm like, why didn't he make a peep?
Yeah.
Steve. Well, Steve's been very happy to join everybody.
All right. Well, that's an hour. From BC Stargazer, some more information, more interesting information.
Oh.
Up to date Okanagan geology education. Nick Zentner from the CWU gives live lectures twice a week on YouTube and covers everything from volcanoes to quakes. I that's the only subject in high school I got an A in. So
Nice. And that's
yeah,
interesting because we have a fault line that runs right through the Okanagan. So
yeah,
it is important for us. And it's interesting for us to educate ourselves on all these things.
yeah,
One of the last things I want to say to folks who've tuned in or who might be watching this show after the fact is you have the power.
yeah.
Feel empowered. Take control of your life. You can help yourself by educating yourself. And that's
Yes.
about all from me today.
Yeah, so thanks for tuning in, everybody. And don't forget to go to Janice's website, divorce-religion.com.
No, divorcing-religion.com.
Divorcing-religion.com
Divorcingreligion.com.
to
Yeah.
learn more about what she does. And you
And
can
book an
buy
appointment because I'm a therapist.
and you can buy cool, very, very blasphemous t-shirts at godlessmom.com.
Yes.
We will be back next week, hopefully, providing we did have a little bit of technical difficulties this morning, but we worked them out before we went live.
Phew, that was close.
So we'll be back next week sometime.
Yeah.
So pay attention and we'll see you then.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.